Hey folks, I'm Matt from Cut Content, and thanks for tuning in to DM Radio. So I'm going to try and keep this one short. It's the final part in this four-part series of just how to get started as, your first time DMing. And so these are just going to be some general tips that will come into play more often than you'd expect. The first one is you planned everything. And I mean everything. Something can go completely sideways. Maybe the players venture so far off your story that it becomes a completely different story. Maybe you improvise something that seems, panicked, frankly, at the time. But if you keep a good poker face, you'll be fine. If you can just act like, straight up, I've planned for all of this, players will believe it. They're very gullible. And also willing to suspend disbelief. And sure, sometimes it can be fun. Like, I have, on occasion, after a session, been like, gotta say, that went in a way different direction than I expected. But, in the moment, it's pretty much always going to be best not to look indecisive. Not because it's like a sign of weakness and they will pounce on you and overthrow you and put a new DM, younger and more beautiful, in your place. But mostly just because it keeps their immersion intact, and that's part of what the game is about. I was listening to a segment on the D&D podcast called Sage Advice. It's a very good segment with Jeremy Crawford, the lead rules designer for Dungeons & Dragons, and he mentioned that there's another person who works there at Wizards of the Coast, I believe Chris Perkins, who used to run a campaign that he was in. And he said that he always sat close to him, and sometimes Chris, the DM, would be nodding and looking, and somebody would, be engaged in the story, and they would ask, for example, like what the name of a character was, and Chris would look down at this piece of paper, and he'd look back up, and, he'd find their name and answer. And Jeremy Crawford said that one time he looked over, and the paper was completely blank. Nothing on it. And that story is so good because it symbolizes so much of what's great about D&D. Just that little extra bit of theatricality can make the world feel lived in because the players believe that you went to that effort. It's great. And because about 85% of the time you have gone to that much effort, because DMing can be a pretty, not even just intense, it's enjoyable, it's so fun, you get excited, you do so much of it. Maybe you don't plan that much for each individual session, but I guarantee you every DM has done world building like nobody's business. To that end, we get to the next tip, which is recycle stuff. Things don't go the way you planned, doesn't matter. Put them somewhere else. They went to a completely different castle than the castle you thought they were going to. In fact, maybe you thought they were going to go to these underground ruins that were shaped like igloos made out of acid. I don't know. That would be a terrible adventure to run, but sure. And instead they end up going to Bright Fairy Castle, being like, plot twist, frozen acid monsters have taken that castle over, or something like that. Try and do better than the example I just gave you, because that was not good. But, seriously, it can be enemies, it can be plot lines, it can be moments, small moments that you were really hoping you get to. They can go pretty much anywhere. You change stuff around, switch things up. Doesn't matter. Nobody's gonna know. And oftentimes the stuff that you keep is the stuff that you're passionate about, which means that it'll be even more exciting. I've had players take things that I never anticipated, and I was able to tie the story into that using some recycled stuff that I hadn't used in previous sessions, that not only made the story better, but worked much better than it would have had it first appeared when I planned it to. It's part of the evolving game, and you really have to just go with that, let it inspire you. So, what to do if they encounter a situation for which you can't recycle anything and you're totally not prepared? Random tables. Random tables are your friend. The new guides for 5th edition are chock full of them. Constant random NPCs, random castle generators, random motivations, random personalities, all of it. But you can also make your own, ones that fit your own world better. Say, for this, I've mentioned before, I'm running a high fantasy Arthurian campaign. I need a list of more, Arthurian names that sound like they might be in Mallory, or even Chaucer, who doesn't directly deal with Arthur and Canterbury Tales as far as I remember. But I can make that table, and then I can just roll for what their name is, what their race is, what their class is, if any of that's necessary. Most of the time, it's just, hey, we're going to meet a librarian, and because we're not rude people, we will ask the librarian's name. It doesn't have to mean anything, but then the librarian has a name, one that feels natural, and one that 4 episodes later, when they inevitably come back and say, hey, can we talk to that librarian who was supposed to be just a bit character there to shepherd us on to literally a book? You'd be like, you mean Blinkins, the gnome. Yes, you may talk to Blinkins, and if you jot down a note or two about what Blinkins' voice sounded like or something, that never hurts either. It's always hard for us DMs to keep everything straight because we're holding a world in our heads, and we're waiting for sometimes long periods of time between visiting that world. Don't worry about it. Take some short notes, have some random tables ready. It'll make your life a lot easier. I wouldn't say this is mandatory, but if you find that you're having these sorts of problems, that's a really good way to solve it. Last thing I want to say is just slash and burn. You have to be your own harshest critic. It's like, and this is one of the only ways, sort of counterintuitively, that D&D is like writing a book. Because in a book you have complete control, and here the whole point is to cede all the control while also retaining some other control. There's a lot of, I'm saying control a lot, you get the idea. But, like for editing a novel, you have to be willing to accept when something is not working, and you have to cut it. Just get it out. There are plot points that I've had for this game I'm running that I shouldn't even call them plot points. I had 5-6 sessions plotted out for what was going to happen next in this campaign. And after the most recent session we had, I realized, no, none of these are going to work. And I mentioned recycling. I will save them. They will work in another campaign. The dungeons I have built, the characters I have created, great. They'll last. They'll still be there for me whenever I need them. But I'm actually going to pull in some other material that I didn't end up using in some of the earlier sessions and kind of make it all new. Because what I initially had planned for this campaign, it was a good concept. But it wasn't working in execution. And it wasn't going to start working in execution. You just have to accept that sometimes they're not all winners. So be merciless. Be brutal. Be like Raging Barbarian D12 damage dice brutal when you hack apart this beautiful thing that you've lovingly crafted. No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. And as the saying goes, no session plan survives first contact with the player characters. It's just how it is. And you don't have to drop things mid-session, although sometimes you probably will. But for me, at the end of this last session, I had a lot of fun. It was a great time. But I look back and I was like, I was really unhappy with that session, with the way I created and ran it. And that was sort of an epiphany for me, meaning, like, I've got all these arcs lined up, these possible things, and I don't think they're worth it. I don't think they're what this campaign wants to be. And sometimes, that was a hard decision to make. I put a lot of time and effort into that. But now I'm excited again about this campaign in a way that I was trying to be when I was plotting out the next few sessions and just wasn't quite. But now that I'm embracing what the campaign wants to become, well, I think there's going to be some really exciting stuff in store. So this is the end of that. Just general tips, things to keep in mind as you're playing sort of at the table at any given moment, or when you're just starting to build the next session. I'll be returning to more gameplay videos with I believe I decided to call it the Month of Spooks, but there will be some DM radios as well, and hopefully a brand new series that is neither gameplay nor DM radio, but don't hold me to that, because I might slash and burn it. See y'all soon. Thanks for tuning in.